Hello and welcome to Addicted to Lacrosse. This is episode 3 for season 2. Today is Sunday, January 11th, 2015. We're recording on a special date. Tyler wanted to watch the Mighty Ducks on TV tomorrow or something like that. I can't remember the details, but so we're recording on Sunday instead. My name is Graham Parrow. With me today are Melissa Daphne and Tyler Fitch. As always, we have the Q&A app running. Head over to google.com/+ addicted to lacrosse, and that will get you to our page. And then you can ask us some questions, and we'll get to the answers as soon as we get the questions. No real news to speak of this week.
I have a little bit of news now I think
there
about
is
it.
news. Okay, go ahead, Tyler.
It's maybe a lack of news, but did they announce players of the week from the league, or do they just do players of the month now? Like I think last year we always had players of the month, but do we have players of the week? Because I don't remember any announcements midweek.
I think they changed that this year so that they have like the 3 stars of each game.
Okay.
Selected by local media or something.
Right.
So they do that per game, and then they have the players of the month as well.
And then Isle Indoor does the 3 stars, cumulative. Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
That makes sense. Thanks.
Okay. All right, on to the games. Game number 1. Well, I guess they were all Saturday night, weren't they? Rochester, New England. Safe to say not a lot of people picked this one. Picked this one correctly, that is. I could have seen New England beating Rochester. I picked Rochester to win this one. I could have seen New England winning it based on how they played against the Bandits. I did not see a blowout, and I imagine not a lot of people did. I watched most of this one online. I had some issues with the feed to begin with, but I managed to get into it not too long into the first quarter. Yeah, Rochester just did not look like defending champions at all. Their offense just wasn't clicking at all. Matt Vince looked ordinary at best, whereas the Black Wolves just looked really good. They looked really good against the Bandits last week. They looked really good against the Nighthawks this week. I didn't expect their offense to be that strong, but it was. It was surprising. Kevin Crowley, I thought had another really good game. I think he scored 10 points in this game, and he's kind of becoming the Cody Jamieson of the Black Wolves offense in that he's kind of the big guy running the show, which I guess is kind of what we expected from him on the wings, and it kind of didn't happen. I mean, 70-odd points is nothing to sneeze at. But I don't know if he's going to keep up the pace he's on now. But even if he drops a little bit and keeps up that strong play, he's going to be up in the 80s and 90s, I'd imagine. Melissa, looks like you saw parts of this one as well.
I did watch this one, although I have to say that this one was a pain in the rear to find. Apparently, once the games are no longer live, Universal takes down practically all the links to them. So unless you have the direct link, you can't access it anymore. So I really had to seek this one out. But I agree with you. Rochester did not look like the defending champions. And I do wonder if New England might be peaking a little too soon because they're looking like a mid to late season team compared to who they're playing so far. They just look really gelled, really energized. They're playing really hard. Kirk looked really good. It was a very chippy game, and it seemed a little bit like New England was kind of rubbing it in a little bit to the Nighthawks, and of course the Nighthawks were getting frustrated and were starting things there. There was definitely a lot of cheap shots from both teams. It's always interesting to me to see how different the refs call the games on the East Coast versus the West Coast. Just some of the things that they get away with, it just does not happen in our games at all. So it's kind of interesting, but it was a really good game. And I mean, it was close the first half. It really didn't kick open until that fourth quarter. It seems like the fourth quarter was a really big one in most of the games. And it was an interesting weekend, that's for sure. Did you see any of this one, Tyler?
I did not. I don't have access to Universal TV package. I didn't dig up the link. Just I think about the mentality in New England right now. Maybe they're in a new arena, 2 straight weeks. They're feeling really energized after last week, and they just came out and took it to them. And I wonder if it's several or majority of the same players they had last year in Philly where they couldn't always put this together. And I wonder if being in Philly and just historically seeing there being less people was just draining and pulling them down. And then now they're in a new place. They don't have a baseline. They don't have a history of we're not meeting the standards of the past. And they're just mentally free and just let loose and taking it to whoever they can play against. And I don't know that that's happening, but it seems like something has definitely changed significantly.
That's a good point. The Wings being the oldest franchise in the league and for many years the most successful. I imagine there's a lot of pressure on those players to try and bring back some of that success to Philadelphia. And of course, for the last 10, 12 years, nobody's been able to do it. They've gotten to the playoffs, I think, 3 times in that time, and they've always lost in the first round. So moving to New England, that pressure is removed. Nobody's expecting anything from them. If they have a decent season, if they make the playoffs at all, that's probably more than anybody would have expected. So all that pressure is removed, and they can just go out there and play. So maybe that's what they're doing. But if, as you say, Melissa, they've kind of peaked early, then it could be a nasty second half for them. But we'll see how that goes.
I think you also, Graham, sorry, you also tweeted out earlier today, like last year they started off 2 or 3-0, and Rochester started off 0-2, and so it doesn't necessarily mean anything either.
Yeah, true as well. There's still a lot of games left to play.
Yep.
We've seen a lot of teams start off really, really, really strong and finish with a whimper. So it'll be interesting to see if they can keep this all season long, or if they do peter out. But I'm really excited to see what these guys can do. Off to a strong start.
Moving on to the second game, Calgary and Colorado. And we were just talking before the show started about Calgary and Colorado's history of 1-goal games, overtime games. I had it up here on the screen a minute ago, and now I lost it. But there have been a handful of games. I think there was one 20-10 blowout or something, and 1 or 2 other games that were decided by 7 or 8. But there was an awful lot of ones in that column, and a bunch of OTs. And of course, true to form, they did it again. I saw none of this game. I was trying to get connected to either this one or the Minnesota game because they were both at the same time on NLL Live, and they were having issues again this week. I think they eventually got it sorted out, but again, I missed this game entirely and most of what I wanted to see for the Minnesota game. So, Melissa, I'm assuming you watched this one.
Yes, I actually saw this one live. It was a fun game, as usual. I really thought Calgary was going to take it. The first half, Mammoth were looking pretty strong. They were making a lot of mistakes, but overall it was a solid performance. And then typical, third quarter, it's like, where'd the team go? You can show up now. I think it was in the fourth. It was like Sean Evans scored like 4 goals in a row. It was like, could somebody please cover him? They were just giving him free reign practically. It was definitely Calgary's game to win. They were starting to run away with it, and it really they managed to stop them in overtime. But it seemed like both goalies kind of struggled off the bat. Ward, I think, got his bearings just a little bit quicker than Poulin, but they definitely were letting in a lot of goals for the amount of shots they'd faced. I think at one point it was like one goalie had let in 4 goals on 5 shots, and the other one was like 4 shots on 6 or 4 goals on 6 shots, something like that. So they definitely were struggling to see the ball that right off the bat. But it was good. It was definitely chippy. Eli McLaughlin is showing some definite potential. I look forward to seeing what he's going to do. He definitely has some highlights last night. Seemed like Drew Westervelt was struggling. which was very unusual to watch him play like that. He kept dropping passes, and when he was passing to the other players, he was just way off, and he was just kind of fumbling the ball. So I don't know if maybe he was feeling a little jet lagged or if he was sick or something, but he definitely was having an off night. The reffing was kind of weird. They were really, really calling slashing and cross-checking very close, which it seems like that is kind of going through the league. But there was one call they said was checking from behind, and it was just a shot to the arm, shoulder, like normal. And they were doing a lot of weird ball resets. There was no shot on goal, nothing, and they were called for a reset like 2 or 3 times on one play, and it was like, wait a sec, there was no shot. So it was definitely a little weird. It was definitely a highlight overtime with John Grant Jr. getting the game winner, but I am starting to feel like he went to the Gouze school of diving, or maybe Gouze learned from him. I don't know. There was one point, I mean, he definitely flops a lot, and I'm not going to deny it. The guy takes some hits. But the problem is when he really gets a hit and there might actually be an injury, he's cried wolf so much that the refs totally ignore him. And even in this instance, it was in the first quarter. About, if you watch on the ESPN feed, it's like 31 minutes in, and he gets hit like 3 different directions, but the way he just falls down, it's so overly dramatic, like a toddler, like just, oh, and you can tell he's playing it up a little bit. But there was a call, but it wasn't on any of those guys. It was the guy that actually was cross-checking Adam Jones. And it's just one of those things that in some ways that really hurts the team because you keep seeing him flop. And it's really frustrating. Because when there really is an injury, the refs they just walk right on by him. So it's my 2 cents there. But it's always fun. I always like watching these two teams play. You never know what is going to happen. And like Graham said, it's almost always a 1-goal game. So many of them go into overtime that you can never count the other team out when it is with these two. So, did you see any of this one, Tyler?
Yes, I watched the first half, and then I switched to the stealth game, and then it kept staying close, so I actually was flipping back quite frequently between the two and saw the OT and everything. Fun game to watch. Jeff Snyder just dominated Bobby the whole game. I think Bobby was 10 out of 37 on face-offs, but the 10th one counts because that was the first draw of OT, and it went down on the first possession and got the goal. So I don't think I've ever seen. Usually they're pretty close, but Jeff just really, really took it to him in this game. I don't know. I loved watching it. Loved the energy on the floor. They're all going up and down in the first quarter. Tons of goals getting scored. Poor goalies just getting shelled. Poulin again pulled himself, I think, in the second quarter to probably try and reset. But I'm liking the Colorado team. Their defensive additions, picking up Tyler Codron, who didn't play last year for Edmonton, but is a phenomenal athlete and lacrosse player. He's got, I think, ties to their coaching staff from the summer, so they knew what they were getting. Ian Hawksby's back this year after being out for a year for, I think, firefighting probation. They're looking tough right now. Westervelt definitely, like you said, didn't look as sharp as he has in the past. But hopefully if he settles down, you'll have something really special there on offense. Yeah, it's a great game.
Yeah, I think Westervelt, it was just an off night because last season he looked really good. And, of course, we watched him with the Outlaws. We watched him with the Wings. And it just really seemed like an atypical night. But it definitely, I think last night gave me more hope for this team this season. But it was, like you said, that the first half, it really felt like it was much later in the game when the first quarter ended. It was one of those times that you're like, wait, that was only the first quarter? You have got to be kidding me. I mean, it was 7-4. It just was such a high-scoring game. So, yeah, it was definitely crazy And then, of course, the third, it was like they just looked so flat. But it was exciting. It was a great home opener. It was nice because I nearly didn't get my tickets renewed this year. It was a huge debacle, long story, but Wednesday I still didn't have my tickets locked in, so it was good to have a good game, and it was really exciting. So, and then there's the Minnesota Edmonton game. You want to start off with that one, Graham?
Minnesota Edmonton. I saw bits of this one. Again, I was having problems with the NLL Live, and finally managed to get connected part of the way through the first, which means I missed the first two Minnesota goals. So I think when I turned it on, it was 2-1, or it might have been 2-0. And then I saw up until about halftime, which means I saw a whole whack of Edmonton goals and one Minnesota goal from Andrew Suter. But it was just all Edmonton. And it just looked like, if you remember last week's game, Minnesota was leading going into the fourth, and then they coughed up 11 goals in the fourth quarter and lost. And it just looked like that had taken the wind out of their sails so much that it would carry over to the next game. And so Edmonton was just going to demolish them. So at halftime, it was about halftime, might have been a little after halftime, I can't remember exactly. That's when the Toronto-Vancouver game started, so I switched over to that. And kind of kept an eye on the Minnesota game over Twitter, but wasn't really paying much attention. And before I knew it, I was seeing tweets that Minnesota was catching up, and they had tied it up. They're taking the lead. I'm like, I must have missed something. Is this something? Somebody's tweeting these jokes out that Minnesota has caught up again because they were behind by so much. But apparently not. Yeah, so a complete reversal from last week. They were losing going into the fourth. They finished up an 11-1 run and won by 4. So kudos to Minnesota. Logan Schuss played in this game after announcing a couple weeks ago that he wouldn't play this season at all. I guess he's available for certain games and not others, so he managed to make this one. Didn't have an awful lot of an impact. I think he had 2 or 3 assists, but that was it. I remember tweeting at some point in the first half that I'd barely heard his name on the telecast at all. And then, of course, 10 seconds later, the announcers mentioned something about him and then said, you know what, we haven't said his name all that much. So, yeah, he was kind of invisible for the first half. I didn't see the second half, as I said, so I don't know what he did there, but he didn't show up on the score sheet an awful lot. Tyler, did you see this game at all? I guess you were watching the Colorado game, so probably not.
Yeah, I was watching the games around the ESPN feed at the same time. But looking at the box score, I love seeing Dean Hill playing. He got 3 assists to help out that team. He's a fun guy. He's very quiet and unassuming, but he just goes out and plays, and you look at him, you're like, that guy? And like, yep, that's the guy that's either just quick sticking goals in or this time was setting up goals. Good team player. I'm glad he's back in the league. That's my 2 cents on the game.
Melissa, did you see this one?
Unfortunately, I didn't. It appears this one is only on the NLL Live site, and it sounds like even if you pay for the package that you don't get the replays, and so there's no benefit for me whatsoever to do that. But it sounds like it was just a really crazy game. And looking at the score sheet, I think what's interesting is, yeah, the fact that they scored 11 goals to Edmonton's 1 in the fourth quarter, which is crazy on its own. But you look at it, and it's really spread out. It's not like there was one player that just got on fire. It's, Miles Thompson had 3 goals, and Andrew Suter had 2 goals, and Caleb Crawford had 3 goals, and it's just really spread out, which I think really shows a lot to Minnesota, because I think when you do see that, it really shows how dangerous a team can be. But it's just, I would love to see this game, because I just want to see where this started happening. Did Edmonton just start falling apart? Did they just wear themselves out? Did they just start sitting, on their laurels because they thought, oh, we have this game? I remember we went down, it was actually the first road trip a bunch of Mammoth fans did. We went to Arizona, and it was kind of one of those games that the Mammoth were just racking up goals, and they'd gotten this huge lead, and you could see the coaches be like, okay, we need to settle this down, and they pulled everything back, and Arizona just came back to win it, and it was because it was like they lost that fire, that intensity they had because they were just trying to kind of sit on the lead. And maybe Edmonton was doing the same thing. I really would love to see this game, but I'm just not going to pay $7 for it. So I really want to know what happened here, though. So it's kind of a shame.
Well, maybe we can apply to the league and see if we can get ourselves named official media, and maybe they'll give us a package or something. So I think the Islandor guys are trying to do that as well. Talk to the league and see if they can do that. I don't know if that's happening or going to happen or anything, but maybe we'll give that a try and see what happens. But yeah,
makes perfect sense. They should treat media appropriately, and to call ourselves media is pushing it, but we are.
True enough. On to the fourth game of the weekend. This one is me versus Tyler. Toronto in Vancouver. And I did watch this one. It was on in high def on TSN, which was pretty cool. Well, for the Canadians, that is. And I have to say I did pick Vancouver in this game just because I thought they looked really solid last week. And I thought Toronto's offense was still a bit of a question mark without Doyle and Billings. That didn't seem to be a problem last night. It is last night because it's Sunday now. I was watching the game on TV, and I actually got a text from a buddy of mine who was also watching it, and I think at that point it was 4-2 or 4-1 or something like that. And he said, yeah, this could be a long game. And then the Rock offense just took off. And I don't know if Josh Sanderson is playing with extra fire in honor of his dad, or if he's playing better because he doesn't have that pesky Colin Doyle bugging him, or I don't know what it is, but he's just on fire. He picked up 4 goals and 10 assists, the highest point total in a single game since 2012 with Garrett Billings. Tyler Richards made a good few stops at the beginning, and I thought, okay, this is going to be a good game for him. And then that kind of stopped. And I don't think all the goals were certainly his fault. He was kind of left out to dry a number of times. But the Rock just made the most of their chances. Again, like I said, Sanderson was on fire. Excuse me. Rob Hellier had a really good game. Brett Hickey seemed to be fitting in pretty well and seemed to enjoy scoring against his old team. Even Billy Hostrauser scored against his old team, which was a little more unexpected, but he scored the game winner, so that's not bad. I was going to say just a great game all around. If you're a Rock fan, that may be true. If you're a Stealth fan, probably not so much. But it just kind of looked like the Stealth gave up in the third quarter. It was like, okay, this game's just out of hand. We're done. And they were kind of going through the motions, and they did score a couple near the end, closer to the end of the game. But by that point, it was just too much to make up, and they just didn't seem interested in the second half, an awful lot of it. And Tyler, what do you think?
That was a bummer of a game. I mean, definitely the first quarter was 4-2 in the Stealth's favor. I thought it'd be okie dokie. Just kind of battled out from there, maintained the lead. 2 goals in the first, maybe 3 minutes, I think it was, for the Toronto tied it up, and they didn't look back. They just gained all the momentum from there. Stealth were missing Rory Smith on defense. They said, I think, because of an injury, and I think it really impacted the defense's ability to settle down as the game went on. Rory's been in this situation many times, being a veteran, and he could have, I think, helped anchor the D better than what was happening during the game. Cliff Smith returned. They said he was also dealing with an injury. That's why he missed last week in Calgary. He's wearing the A for an assistant captain. That's pretty cool to see. He's a pretty quiet guy, like publicly. If you ever go to do any of the team events, he'll just kind of sit there and hang back. But privately, when he's comfortable around people, he's probably like a little introverted like I am. Like, if if you don't know him, you're just gonna say, who's that guy standing around? But when you do, he comes out and shares stuff. He's a funny guy and can be pretty inspirational or just kind of break the ice. Obviously, it didn't help this week, but it was nice to see you or get a status update and figure out that he's still going to be around for the year. And last week was just a one-off. Johnny Palos got his first goal of the season. He only took 4 shots, which is awful. That's Lewis Ratcliffe effect when you play with Lewis, who took, I think, 8 shots on goal or 9, and they both had the same number of goals. So if you look at efficient output, Johnny's the guy. But he doesn't get the ball. He can't do anything. If he's only taking 4 shots, he doesn't have the ball, and they need to adjust that. I think they gave Lewis 2 shots now, and they need to be more stern in deciding when he goes on the floor or if he dresses or not. I don't know what they're going to do about it, but the ball's dying in his stick over there. Even Jason Greger was calling it out. It's like, when you play with Lewis, you don't get a lot of looks on that side of the ball, but Johnny's supposed to get looks. He's the face of the team this year as far as a lot of the new marketing because he's the new guy. And he doesn't get the ball. He can't do anything, and you can't win games that way. Caleb Wiles also I'd say he returned to earth, considering he came in his basically first big game last week and had 2 goals and probably a few assists, and then this week he was skunked across the board. Like no loose balls, no assists, no goals. And I don't know if that's because they just finally, the guys on the Rock looked at the tape and figured out what to do against him, or if it was the overall effect of the game, the flow of the game. Again, he's playing on the same side as Lewis. He doesn't get as many touches. It's tough to say. But the lefty offense, same woes as last year, and they got to address that for the Stealth. Decent crowd. I think the attendance was 45 or 4,700. Not a sellout. And on opening night, when they had the most time all year to prepare for that, it's kind of a bummer. But it was a pretty good crowd, but they also were totally thinned out by the fourth quarter. Lots of empty seats. People didn't want to stick around to see how that was going to go. Great game by the Rock. They weathered the initial push and then decided to say, yeah, we are the better team, and this is what it's going to look like when we do what we want to do, and basically doubled up the Stealth. It made switching back to the Colorado-Calgary game easier. I knew I wasn't really missing anything, and it was worth watching that instead. Let's see. Anything else on this game? You weren't even home to watch the game, so maybe I don't know if you watched any of it, Melissa, afterwards on a replay.
I actually did watch this one today on replay.
Right.
Yeah, that's who cares about football? I don't care. I watch all the lacrosse games I can fit in. I think a lot of Denver fans are wishing they didn't like football as well, from what I hear. But anyway,
not good.
This one, it's kind of like you said. Vancouver just looked really lackadaisical. It seemed like there was never a sense of urgency with them. There was never really a fire. It was, and I've seen the Mammoth do this too, and I definitely have seen the Stealth do it a few times, where it's just like the team just from start to finish, it just seems like they are not in the game. They give up, and it's, as a fan, it's the most frustrating thing to watch. Because this team can play so much better, and it's like they're just rolling over and giving up, and it's frustrating. Because I don't want to take anything away from Toronto, because Toronto was playing awesome, and Sanderson had an awesome night. I mean, he had 4 goals and 10 assists. I mean, that is pretty crazy. But it just didn't seem like Vancouver really was ever in it. It seemed like they just got off on the wrong foot and just never found their footing, and then kind of went, I don't care, which was really kind of sad to see. But it was good to see that Toronto, they really kind of kept their foot on the gas the whole time and really didn't back off. Otherwise, maybe we would have been watching another game like Minnesota-Edmonton. I don't know. I mean, we're always talking, and this is a game of runs, and sometimes you just have to get that run at the right time. And it's interesting because my husband and I were actually just talking about this because we keep saying, the Mammoth aren't playing 4 quarters, they're not playing 4 quarters. And it's like, well, what are we really saying about that? So this is a game of runs. Are we being too hard on the Mammoth because they're just having, those up and down periods like normal? And I think in this instance, this is kind of where the stealth, really showed that it seems like they're just not really going out there and really putting everything into it. They're just not playing as hard as they can. They're kind of giving up. And I think it was the third quarter of the Mammoth was kind of that way. It's like they really weren't going after the Lucies. They were just kind of like, whatever, And it's so frustrating to see that. But maybe with was Chris Hall, was there a big deal made out of that in Vancouver? Maybe it just kind of put a cloud over their head. I don't know, because I know at the Mammoth game we did a big moment of silence for everybody that was lost.
They did a pregame little video montage to both him and Terry Sanderson.
So yeah, maybe that kind of got into some of the players' heads. I mean, Chris Hall was a huge part of that organization for a long time, and I've heard nothing but good things, about him from players and other coaches in the league and stuff. So maybe it just started them off on the wrong foot because their mind got taken out of the game. It's really hard to say, but I guess the game next week against Buffalo is probably going to be a big turning point, even though we're so early in the season. I think if they lose that game too badly, it really may kind of be a downward slide, or it could fire them up.
It would definitely hurt the feeling for the fans. So they come to the first 2 games of the year and they get blown out the first one. Maybe they lose the second one. The casual fan will be like, I'm not going to go back and pay for that and make the effort to a team that hasn't impressed me in 2 tries. That could be very detrimental to things like attendance versus team morale, which would also probably suffer because then they'll be going out and like, the place is empty. And then they'll be like, what am I playing for? People or myself or what? Hopefully both.
Well, I guess we'll move on to the prediction section, and I'm kind of thinking we should skip this because I'm not doing so well this year. After dominating you guys last year, which is not quite right. I think I beat Tyler by 1 and Melissa by 3 or something like that. But I did okay last year. This year, not so much. I've got 1 right out of 9 games, so that's not so good, including 0 for 4 this past weekend. That said, I'm only a game behind Tyler, and 3 behind Melissa, who's 4 and 5. So I guess we will start. Well, there was only 1 game this week anyway, so worst I can do is 0 and 1, I guess, in this one. Buffalo playing in Vancouver. I was going to say I'm going with Buffalo. Maybe I should go with Vancouver because then Buffalo will win. Anyway, I'm going with Buffalo. I went with Vancouver in the first couple games, and they actually, no, I didn't go with Vancouver in the first game, but was going to, and didn't, and they won. Then I went with them because they impressed me in the first game, and they didn't impress me so much on Saturday. So I'm switching teams again, going back to the not Vancouver team. Buffalo, I guess we saw them twice last week. They lost to the Black Wolves, who were a really solid team. Then they beat the Rush, who were a really solid team as well. Cosmo's right up there in goals against and save percentage, like he usually is. Their offense looked not bad against the Black Wolves, better against the Rush. And I kind of hope for Vancouver's sake that they manage to recover from yesterday and have a good game next week. Because, like you said, Tyler, starting off your season with 2 home losses is not going to be good for crowds. But as for my picks, I'm going to go for Buffalo. Tyler, what do you think?
I don't know. I can't see potentially a big difference between the teams right now. Both 1 and 1. I think Buffalo was more consistent in their 2 games. I mean, the Stealth put up a ton of goals against a tough Calgary team in Calgary and then come home and they stunk. I think they can right the ship. It'll be close. The logic I used last week was that Toronto had to travel, so it would be difficult for them, and it was not. But still, Buffalo has to travel. It should be difficult, but apparently the hotel in Langley must give people a perfect night's sleep so they can wake up and destroy the Stealth. But I'm going to go ahead and pick Vancouver to see if they can right that ship along the lines of they're going to be highly motivated to not have 2 straight losses at home and disappoint the fans in that way as well as themselves on their record. Melissa, what are you thinking?
I think I'm picking Buffalo. Vancouver we know they're struggling, but it seems like they're struggling more at home, which, as you said, really stinks. I think when you don't have the wins at home, it really does hurt attendance. We've even seen it with the Mammoth, where they got down pretty low, like 8,000 or 9,000 fans a game, which is basically the season ticket holder base. I think it's definitely Vancouver's game to lose. I wouldn't count them out by any means, but I think Buffalo tends to start the season off a little stronger, and Vancouver tends to struggle a little bit. So I think just with history, until they prove me otherwise, I think I'm going to have to take whoever's playing against Vancouver, just kind of like with Minnie. Although Minnie, I think, is starting to convince us we need to give them a second look. Do either of you guys know why we only have the one game this weekend? It's not like it's Super Bowl weekend or something.
No, it's divisional playoffs. And they even have at least one game Super Bowl weekend, if not more. Yeah, I got nothing. Maybe it's the good hockey push that all the arenas got booked up because they want to get games in before the Super Bowl. So we're all playing second fiddle in arenas. And Vancouver doesn't have a hockey team pro level to worry about, so they're the ones hosting in the easiest or second easiest arena to get. You figure actually New England's probably the easiest arena to book right now.
Yeah, the schedule's a little odd. In previous years, it's been a little more even. They've had a week or two with 5 or 6 games and a week or two with 1 or 2 games. This year this weekend only has 1. There's at least 2 weekends that I'm looking at that have 2 games. And there's 1 weekend that has 7, and the first weekend in April has 8. So that's going to be an awfully busy show to talk about on that Monday. Yeah, so I don't know if it just kind of worked out that way that there only ended up being 1 game this weekend, or if there was an actual arena issue that they just couldn't get the arenas and there only ended up being 1. Okay, one more thing that we wanted to get to since we only had 1 prediction to make. Melissa, I'll turn this one over to you. There was some news from the Colorado Mammoth.
Yeah, it was actually kind of interesting. Before the start of the game, the Mammoth announced that they are going to start moving forward, and every year there's going to be several team-given awards that are going to be named after, basically they're all fan favorites that were all on the championship team. And they had everyone but Gary Gate, who apparently had other obligations because he's coaching women's lacrosse right now, and so he couldn't make it. But there's going to be a Gary Gate Award, which is going to be a player deemed by the organization as the most valuable for each season for outstanding performance on the floor. So that was definitely sounds like a pretty big award. The Dave Stilley Award, which of course Dave Stilley was very popular in Colorado, which wasn't everywhere, but I have some fond memories of some of his games. But his will be given to the team's outstanding defensive player. Brian Langtree Award will be selected by fan vote, so that could be interesting. And that will be presented annually to the player that embodies the spirit of the Mammoth. And that one is, I think, probably the most vague of them, because Brian Langtree was definitely one of those players that he was just so amped, and if he was fired up, it was hard not to watch him play and not be fired up. Which is probably why they named this one after him, and he was definitely a fan favorite. So it's going to be interesting to see who gets this one the first few years.
I was going to
Jake
say,
Cal-
I don't know exactly what the spirit of the mammoth is, but whatever it is, Brian Langtry has it.
I would agree with that. And that's why it's like this one is kind of vague because I think for some of these players it's kind of hard to really get attached to your team per se because they get traded and they move around so much that even a great player can still have played on 3 teams in 5 years or something. So it'll be kind of interesting. We don't have a whole lot of long-term players it seems on the Mammoth. There's a few. We'll see. We'll have the J. Gilbert Award, which is going to honor the ideal teammate who exemplifies selfless play and commitment and dedication to his team, as voted by the Mammoth players, and recognizing individuals as a superior leader within the NLL. So it sounds like this is kind of like a glorified sportsmanship award, but a little bit more than just sportsmanship. So I don't know. J. Gilbert definitely seemed like the type of player that he would sacrifice himself for the greater good. I mean, he would take some really crazy hits if it meant somebody else could score. So maybe that's kind of what they're looking at for this one.
I think
It'll be
is.
interesting.
That's how I remember him.
He definitely, and that's part of why he's not playing. Is he definitely took a hit in the championship game that maybe he shouldn't have, but it did help him win. And then we had we're gonna have the Jamie Hanford Award, which will acknowledge a player who possesses great inspirational qualities to his team on and off the floor. And this one I thought was very interesting because I know Man Cub was a fan favorite, but I never heard anything about him from other fans, other players, other teams that really struck me that he was a very inspirational person. So I don't know if you guys know anything different. This one struck me as a little bit odd from my knowledge of him.
I think they
Doesn't
wanted
mean
to
it's
call it the
right.
Gavin Pratt Award, but they don't like Gavin Pratt, so they stuck it to him and called it the Jamie Hanford Award.
Well, and it definitely is interesting because it's like you talk to John Gallant, and he definitely seems to be more of that type of person. That he's that silent inspiration. I mean, Brian Linktree was the big, loud inspiration. He's that quiet inspiration, but of course he's still playing, so I guess you can't have an award named after a current player. But it just struck me personally as odd because he definitely was a good player and he had an impact. He never struck me as that inspirational leader type. And then finally, there's going to be the President's Award, which a member of the organization who performs with a very high standard of excellence over a single season or several years, either on the floor as a player, within the executive staff, or a combination of both, will be eligible to receive the President's Award as selected by the head of the organization. And so they're going to be hanging all these awards every year in the locker room, along with plaques for everybody who's been inducted into the Hall of Fames and things like that. So it was interesting that I think in our 13th season, that we're moving forward with a bunch of team awards. I would think if you were going to announce this almost seems like on our 10th year anniversary that this kind of might have made more sense. So I'm definitely curious what the thinking moving forward was. Maybe they're thinking that's part of why we haven't gotten into the playoffs is because a lack of inspiration. I don't know. It's interesting. It'll be interesting to see if any of the other teams follow suit. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I'm wondering if the names will really stick because the Jamie Hanford Award after Gallant retires should totally, by description, be the John Gallant Award. And down the road, Adam Jones is one of the greatest players you ever have. Is there something that goes to him as recognition other than having won maybe one of these awards a few times? Because he's on pace. If you're going to have maybe a Rookie of the Year award for whoever the best Mammoth rookie was, which is tricky because sometimes there's only 1, 2, or 3. It's kind of like if there's only 2, like one guy goes, you didn't get it, sorry. But he was, I think, your most recent Rookie of the Year, and he would be a good person to name a rookie award after.
The Rock has one award that they give out every year, which is oddly enough called the Les Bartley Award, which is completely unrelated to the league's Les Bartley Award, which is given to the Coach of the Year. And I meant to look up what the definition of this Les Bartley Award is for the Rock, and I can't remember what it is, and I never managed to find it. But I think it's kind of a hand wavy description of a player that exemplifies the qualities that Les Bartley found important. They may or may not have said what those were, or if it was just kind of vague. But it almost seemed like if you're playing well on the floor and you're kind of an ambassador for the team off the floor and that kind of stuff. And the usual suspects for the Rock have picked it up in the last few years: Josh Sanderson, Colin Doyle, Patrick Merrill. These players that have played for the Rock for a number of years. It's almost like it's not a big deal that they announce it in the first game of the season, and they have a little plaque and they announce who won it last year, and they come out and they get the plaque, and then you never hear about it again until the first game of the next season. So it's kind of a low-key thing, but it's just the one award. They certainly don't have the whole suite of awards that the Mammoth do. I am not aware of any other teams that have anything similar.
All right.
Okay, I guess that's it for this week, unless you guys have other news to talk about. But I think that was pretty much it for this week. You can get hold of us at addictedtolacrosse.com. That's where all of our shows are archived. You can send us email if you want to ask us some questions or give us some suggestions for what we can talk about on the show. Feedback at addictedtolacrosse.com. You can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/laxpodcast, and on Twitter as well, laxpodcast. So there's all kinds of ways to find us. So that would be it. This has been another episode of Addicted to Lacrosse. For Tyler and Melissa, I'm Graham. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next week.